Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar this afternoon, hosted by Innovate BC. We're so thankful, Cando, so thankful for this partnership. So welcome, my name is Michelle. I am joining from Edmonton and Misquithie-Waskagan, Treaty 6 territory. I come with a full heart. I come with, a grateful heart for another day. I give thanks to Creator for the gifts of the land, the gifts of community, of our families, of our loved ones in our circle, the gifts of the lessons and teachings and the knowledge that's passed on to us. So today, we're so grateful, so thankful for our guest speaker, Leann. We're delighted that she's joining us again. She has some really good knowledge she's going to pass on. And we're just really thankful for this virtual circle, this virtual moment, opportunity to learn and to take in some good information. I always say that I'm a student for life, so I'm constantly learning and growing. And these webinars have been such a fantastic way just to engage and to listen and to understand and just, put those tools in my toolbox for when I need them. And today's topic is preparing your business for disaster. And I think that this is, timely, this is important conversation to have. I'm going to just pull up the bio. So today, it's the question to you is, do you know what it takes to prepare your business for any disaster? There are many proactive steps you can take in advance. So you've joined this session in order to better understand what you could do now and to ensure your own business continuity. And at this last year or 16 months or so, as we've been walking through this pandemic, we've learned so many lessons along the way. We've learned how to pivot. We've learned how to adapt and adjust. And I just think that this is a really good reflection. This is a really good workshop just to remind us, as we're looking after our own organizations and businesses and communities, this is really important. Workshop and topic today. So welcome. It is my honor to introduce our guest speaker. So Leann Hackman-Carty, she's the CEO of the Economic Developers Alberta. She has been in this position since 2009, so that tells you right there she's coming with a wealth of experience and knowledge. In 2014, Leann completed a project with 11 Alberta flood-impacted communities. In 2016 to 17, she worked with the Fort McMurray region on a business and economic recovery by setting up and operating the business hotline, validating businesses for Red Cross emergency relief, and leading a 10-member economic recovery assessment team to the region. Wow, amazing work. In 2019, she updated the Community Toolkit for Economic Recovery and Resiliency, the Canadian version, to help communities prepare for and recover from economic disruptions, and brought the award-winning, let me say that again, the award-winning Disaster Recovery and Resiliency Training Program to Canada, which she currently teaches in person and online. At the end of December 2017, she released her Master Your Disaster series of guidebooks on Amazon. Woo woo, shout out to Amazon, which was designed to help individuals, businesses, and communities prepare for, respond to, and recover from disasters. And the list could go on and on. She has so much wealth and knowledge and experience that she's going to share with us this afternoon. So we're so excited, delighted that you have joined us. So I'm going to pass this virtual mic over to you, Leann. Thank you for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm just going to share my screen. And so, great. Hopefully I can move it forward, no problem. But thank you very much, Michelle. You've got such a great energy. And so I hope I can keep it up, because I know it's where I am, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So what I just wanted to talk to a little bit about is preparing your business for any disaster. And just like Michelle said, COVID is one disaster, but it could be a flood, it could be a fire, it could be a technological type of disaster. So we're going to just go through some of these things. So the presentation today, and we'll have some time at the end for questions if we have some time, I'm sure we will, but just a little bit about disasters, about some of the top business challenges that can happen as a result, how to prepare your business, looking at your 6 critical functions, and just a few resources. So my background, Michelle went through pretty much. I actually started my career in the city of Calgary working for the mayor's office for over a decade, and it was in the economic development space. So I've kind of been in the community economic development world my entire life. So I just kind of fell into the disaster space in 2013 with the Calgary, Southern Alberta floods. And since that time, I've just become more and more passionate about the fact that businesses and communities must be more prepared. And there are tools and things that you can access that are valuable. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And so that's really what I've focused my most recent activities on. If you're familiar with any of your emergency management people within your community or your organizations, this is the continuum that they go by. So your first one is prevention and mitigation. That's really where you're trying to reduce your risk. So this could be at a business level, if we're talking specific to businesses, looking at where are your potential risks and trying to prevent anything from happening based on that particular risk. The preparedness piece is when you really start to practice things, to exercise things, to figure out, will it, if I'm in that situation, do I know what to do? Do my employees know what to do? The third one is the response. How are you going to respond when the incident happens? Who's in charge? What's going to happen? In what order? And then the recovery, and that will go through as well. But that's really the part after your response, when you just start rebuilding, when you're trying to get back. And that's really what we're in right now with COVID. We're still in that recovery space and probably will be for quite some time. This is a chart. The Canadian government, they have this Canadian disaster database. And the reason I like to share this slide is to just give people an understanding of the types of hazards that are most likely to happen in Canada. So by far, the biggest one is flood. So when you're looking at your business, if you're in a flood-prone area, it's very wise to think that that's a potential hazard you need to think about for your business. Wildfire is another. Storm, thunderstorm, that could be, winter storms. Winter storms is different, but industrial accidents. So you'll see there's various types. Some may not apply to you. If you look here, I don't even think outbreaks, disease, serious illness, it's halfway down. It's probably going to be higher up the in these rankings after COVID, but that's really the main types of disasters that happen in Canada. This is what happens after a disaster, and it's called a false economy. So you think about, say, Fort McMurray or even High River. So if you're familiar with what happened in these two communities in Alberta, in High River, there was a flood. People started getting back to normal. When they started getting back to normal, all of a sudden there's all these people coming in. So it could be construction people to rebuild. It could be all kinds of different services. And right after, you might think, hey, I'm doing okay. We're already recovered. But then all those people leave. All those people that were on the recovery, the response side, they've left the hotels, they've left the restaurants, they've left, the Walmarts, whatever it is, but they've gone home. And now all of a sudden it starts to go, oh, so what is it really going to be like? And I look, High River and Fort Mac are good examples. 2013 floods, High River is still not totally back to normal, nor is Fort McMurray since 2016. So that equilibrium, it takes a while to figure out, who's still there, who's open and better than before, and who's not there any longer. And we're seeing devastating business closures here with COVID. But, we still don't know in our respective communities, what's it going to look like when this whole thing is over? What's that new equilibrium going to look like? This is a resilience chart that I like. It just kind of is a similar thing, but it shows, we need to anticipate some of the things that could happen to us. And then you withstand those shocks, recover, and then adapt or reposition. And that's what we're hearing a lot of, that pivoting, that adapting, that repositioning your business. But this cycle to me is good for business because it shows it's a circle. You are constantly doing this. You're anticipating your threats. You're figuring out how you're going to withstand them. You're going to figure out how to recover and adapt and become better and better and better over time. So now we'll just shift a little to the top business challenges. And if you're in business, which I assume you are, thinking about, yeah, I probably experienced that. Oh, yeah, probably there. Check. First, that recovery piece I mentioned earlier. It's tough. With the response, it is kind of a finite part. When when the emergency responders leave, it's over. Now it's recovery. Recovery, though, you never quite know when it starts and ends because you're doing short-term planning and long-term planning at the same time. So this just shows, if anyone ever comes to you and says, well, you haven't recovered, it's been a year. What's your problem? Well, it's not that easy. Sometimes, it's fast and other times it's not. It's more complicated. So recovery does take a long time. Vulnerabilities you didn't know you had. And this comes, I share this because of COVID. The whole supply chain was devastated. I mean, if you're trying to get any product out of China right now, I heard yesterday there's 54 ships just hanging out in the waters outside of the LA port waiting to dock. They can't get in. And so, this is the kind of thing that's going on right now. And even if you got in, you might not have a truck to get it to where you need to go. So that whole supply chain security is a major issue right now. Building access sometimes, if you can't get into your building and you have valuable equipment or stuff inside, that can be something you may not have thought about. Contacting employees sometimes, your data. We'll go through a bit of that later, but you usually don't figure this out until it happens, and then you go, oh shoot, I didn't think of that, and then you got to plan for a better response next time. Navigating government programs, these I always find it's hard when it's not a disaster to figure out who does what, let alone when you're in the midst of a disaster. So as a business, it's important right now to, if you have downtime ever, which is hard, but if you did, to try and think, so who at my local, like who in my community could help me? What resources are there to help me now, but also during a disaster? Because there are programs in each of these various levels, and there's probably more, depending which area you're in. But understanding who does what and how they can help and building those relationships in advance is a good thing to do. The mental health piece, and people often tell me, well, why would you even say this in a business type of environment? Well, because it's really important and nobody talks about it. And this, you're seeing, this is a chart that shows what happens after a disaster. The impact happens and all of a sudden everybody comes, we're going to get this, we'll all band together and everything will be great. You got this honeymoon period and everybody's coming to town helping you out. Well, then they leave and you kind of hit this, this disillusionment part where you go, what the heck? Like, is this how it's going to be? So that's kind of what happens from a mental health perspective. I know, many times too, you never know what goes on in your employee's head or in your, in your customer's head. I know with High River, I believe the stats were quite high. I think 3 years after the floods, 75% of their staff had turned over, something like that. It was a very high statistic. So you think, these things happen to people and it impacts you. I'm a firm believer in a disaster happens, you're never the same. You will not be the same. You could be better, but you will never be the same. So just be conscious of your own mental health, especially right now with COVID, all the negative news that you watch every day. Protect your mind from all of this negativity because it's tough to just keep going every day. Staying open. 40% of businesses do not reopen following a disaster, and another 25% fail within a year. So that's a pretty compelling statistic to think about. If you go, okay, so I want to be one of the ones who does reopen and does not fail. And so these are some of the things coming up that I'm just going to highlight that can help you be on the positive side of this statistic. So here are the kind of 6 critical business functions I'm going to go over. I'm going to go over each one individually. But if you use this kind of as a template, it'll allow you to go, okay, check. Yeah, I've thought of that. I've thought of that. I have a plan. So first, one of the things that you need to protect in your business is people. And that means safety, having your team members trained in an emergency. Do they all know what they're supposed to do? Do you have their contact information? If everybody, in the case of Fort McMurray, I was working with their economic development people, and they had, I think, 9 people at the time of the fire, and they ended up dispersing across the country. There was some in Vancouver, some in Edmonton, Calgary, Winnipeg, I think, and Toronto. And so they were all over the place. Had they not had emergency contact information, they wouldn't know where they are, because they just ran, they got out of there. So really making sure you know how to connect with people, their personal email, cell phone, whatever. If you need to reach them, it's important. Practicing drills is always a good thing. If you have a physical space, it's important to even, when you have a bit of time, just say, okay, we're going to practice a fire drill. We're going to practice if it floods or whatever it might be. It could be, God forbid, a shooting or something, but you practice for the scenarios that might happen. So people have it fresh in their mind as well, because if it was 3 years ago, I've probably forgotten, or maybe things have changed. And emergency supplies. And in a business case, that could be cash, like not credit cards, because if banks are down, you might need cash. So these are things that you need to think about. Your data is another one. A lot of people, I myself, and partly guilty, have your records in, say, a filing cabinet, or sometimes people put their receipts in a box and then give them to their accountant once a year. That's great if you don't have a fire or a flood. But if you do, what are you going to do? You got nothing. You got no history. And so really understanding what are the important documents you need to keep? Where should they be kept? On-site, off-site, in the cloud, all of these things you should think about. And these are just the kinds of documents to have ready to go. And maybe having it in a supply kit, like a kind of a portfolio that you just put them all in, and someone's responsible for grabbing that on the way out the door. So that's another thing to think about for your business, because without data, that could be a major failure point in your business. Key contacts, like I said, your employees, but also your customers, your suppliers, anybody who visits your building, your partners, your employees, anyone who you interact with, because your vendor may not know that you had a disaster and they're saying, excuse me, but you haven't paid your bill. Well, excuse me, I can't find my bill. So just making sure everybody who interacts with your business is aware of the fact that, yeah, I'm out of my business for a month. We're doing it over here now. There's my contact information if you need to reach me, but thinking about that in advance. Your vital records. This is the other thing. If you think there was going to be potentially a disaster program with the government, find out in advance what kinds of information you might need. Because that's the kind of thing you want to apply for quickly once the disaster happens. But if you don't know what you're supposed to collect, it could take you quite a while after the fact. Then you've got operations. And so this is really, knowing what risks, maybe pick the top 2 or 3 risks that you think. Now the risk could happen, but it may not impact you, or a risk could potentially happen and the impact could be great. So really try to think the ones that are top, and most likely it's going to be if your place is flooded, if there's a fire, perhaps it's a tornado if you're in a tornado alley. But those are most likely the kinds of physical disasters that could happen. If a chemical plant, you've seen plants blow up. There's all kinds of things, right? If you're next to a hazardous waste place, like all of these factors you need to think about when you're putting these together. How would they impact your business? What could you do to mitigate them in advance? So flooding could be just something outside. You've got to figure out how to grade your property differently, or have sump pumps, whatever it is. But thinking about how these things could be done to mitigate something worse happening. And what is critical to bring back in 24 hours, and what's, if we get it working in a week or 2 weeks, a month, it's not as critical. But there are some things especially with employees, they're going to say, I need paid. So where's my payroll? What's happening there? So these are kinds of things you got to think about what's really critical to get back fast. Sometimes it's your computer, obviously, internet. Knowing I talked about that emergency cash on hand, just in case, or your credit, just in case you're going to need to buy something quickly. And I know in some places, I think in particular is Puerto Rico, I think of, the ATMs were not working. So, and it was quite a while because they had no electricity. So understanding how much cash do you need for, say, a week if you needed it? Do you have a plan to pay your employees? I mentioned that a bit earlier. And can they work remotely? I think COVID has made everybody have to figure this piece out. None of us probably were thinking about it. And a lot of businesses said, there's no way our employees are ever going to work from home. I can't see them. I don't know if they're really working. Forget it. But I think this whole COVID thing has made employers realize we can all work remotely. We've had to. And so what does that look like? And what are those processes, procedures that allow them to work outside of the basic operations center? Another thing is your property, protecting your property. So in this, you may or may not have a building. If you have a building, are you inspecting it regularly? Are you checking out things that could potentially go wrong? Your roof, your soffits, your doors, like who knows, your windows. Are you just inspecting and making sure everything's fine? Keeping dead trees, block drains, those kinds of things fixed. Are you looking at things that you can increase that preparedness piece? I mentioned better siding drainage. Maybe you need sprinkler systems within your building, storm shutters. That's really what you'd consider in a hurricane. But these are the kinds of things that you could budget for on an ongoing basis to say, okay, I'm at risk of a fire. I need a sprinkler system. I can't afford it right now, but I'm putting it in my budget for next year because I know that in the long run, it's going to protect me should a fire occur. So that's the kind of thing in protecting your property. Your inventory is another thing you have to look at, depending on your business, but if you have inventory, what kind of equipment do you have on site? What kind of office furniture, computer equipment, supplies, everything you can think of. What photos to help you with future insurance claims. I know in the case of the floods, we did some work on Siksika, and in that case, people had lost their cultural kind of gowns, the stuff that they used, the dress for powwows. And that was part of what they got paid to do. That was part of what they did as a livelihood. And they didn't have pictures. So so how do you prove that's what you did and that's what you did for a living? So really understanding in advance, what are the things I need to prove? I have a list. I had 10 desks. I had 5 computers. I had, 3 telephones, whatever it is. But you can prove after that that's what you had for inventory. And what kind of business insurance? Do you have insurance? A lot of businesses in Fort McMurray did not have the right insurance and they didn't have insurance. And so depending on the nature of your business, if you have a lot of equipment, a lot of things that need insured, if you don't have insurance, you're pretty much probably going to close your doors immediately. So really understanding, do I need to carry insurance and what type of insurance do I need to carry in the particular case of my business? Part of that could be, if a disaster happens, do you have that additional operating expenses? How are you going to cover those in the interim? If you have to move to a different location, how do you pay for that? Is that part of your insurance policy? If you lease that property, what does the landlord's insurance cover? What's your responsibility? And so really that insurance piece, it sucks because those documents are really long. And if you ask anyone what's in their insurance policy, they probably say, I have no clue. But sitting down with your broker and really saying, okay, this is my business. This is what I need to protect. You need to help me understand what I need covered. I don't want to buy too much coverage, but I don't want to underinsure either. So that's something to just really think about. So just a few resources. Michelle talked about this. This business continuity plan is something I developed for the Business Link. So it's an organization, I think there's different organizations across the country, but Business Link, this was something that we put together for them. And it's a business, I think it's available on their website, but it's we designed it in a way where you can just input stuff directly into the PDF, so you don't have to redevelop it yourself. If you can't, Michelle, if for some reason you can't find it there, I can send it to you and you can put it on your website, I'm sure, or give it to the people that are here for reference. And then I, like Michelle said, I do my own, that's my book, and I found COVID planning tools. I actually do videos on YouTube, because when I was doing the floods and the fires, I just found there's so much information out there, but I don't know what's good. And so I just started thinking, well, if I can't find it, maybe others can't find it. So I try to put out stuff that's valuable to people that can say, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's the best practice. So those are some other resources. And then there's my information if you want to reach me. But that's really the end of my presentation. I feel like I rambled very quickly, but I am happy to answer questions or go back to a certain point and explain it further if there's anyone that has questions around it. So thank you for listening.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Leann, for sharing your knowledge. I'm always about mental health, so I particularly liked what you had to say. Like the struggle is still real, when it comes to, what we're going through with COVID and the mental health. When you showed that little diagram, I really believe we're still in the disillusionment.
Yeah.
That disillusionment. Oh gosh.
Yeah. Disillusion. I know it's a hard word. Disillusionment. Oh, I can't even say it now. Disillusionment.
There we go. Like, I feel like we're still there. And even here in Alberta, there's an article that came out, I think it was in the Guardian. I'm not sure how reputable that source is, but it was talking about, here in Alberta, that there's this fear of our hospitals, our healthcare collapsing within a month, just because of the rise and the numbers and what a toll it's taking on our healthcare. So I feel like, now emotions and stress, I feel like it's kind of been like this, but we're here right now. And just to how to respond and cope in mental health, I think is so important, and so important to address. So I think that's really important that you said it in regards to disasters and what we're going through collectively today. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Does anyone have, Helen or Ken, do you have any questions or comments regarding today's topic?
It's Ken, and my comment is on the mental health. The mental health, it's Canadian Mental Health Association has a course, and it's now being broken down into a online course. Some organizations, it's for approximately $150, but are offering it online course. But it's not offered. It was offered through I think it's the Ontario Federation of Labor is offering it. I believe that. But it's come down from 2 days for $800 to a online course. I'm not sure how long it is, for about $150, but it's very, very extremely, because we always run into people and we throw up our hands and we don't know what to do. And even for self-help. The other thing to be aware of is there is a course that all the police take, and it's called ASSIST. ASSIST. Maybe I got too many S's in there. It's ASIST, and that's Advanced Suicide Intervention Skills Training. And all the police officers take that, and it's an excellent course to be able to assist somebody who keeps telling you they're down, they're having, they've been down for months and for years, they're taking pills or whatever. To be able to try and assist them, so all that kind of stuff is valuable. You may not, if you have the first aid training, you may not be in the position to be able to jump in to help, but at least if you have the training, it's better than if you don't have the training. It's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. And it gives you a comfort level to be able to approach them, at least make an attempt, or at least guide them somewhere that they can get help. But if you don't have the training, if you don't have the knowledge, you just throw your hands up and you shake your head in dismay. In I work at a federal agency at head office, and we've had now this has been over a few years, but we had 2 suicides. One recently just during COVID, and he was a very strong Indigenous manager and senior manager, and you think he was pretty strong. He was in charge of a lot of people, and he ended up committing suicide. So it's the people you don't you can't unless they approach you, you don't know. But if they do approach you, or you hear about it, if you're trained, you can help, or at least make an attempt to help. It's just like I say, the one is called.
Missed you there, Ken.
Yeah, the first.
Yeah, but yeah, if they're.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think Leann has frozen.
Sorry for going on with the rant, but I feel very strongly about it. This training, my personal opinion, should be free to anybody who wants it or needs it, and that should be from the it's the Canadian Mental Health Association. And if anybody's got an ear to Justin Trudeau, or whoever may be the new Prime Minister, this needs to be available to anybody who wants it free of charge. Now the assist training, that's a separate organization, but a Canadian Mental Health Association. Sorry for the rant, but you did ask if there was any comments, and it was part of your presentation.
Yeah, no, it's a very important part, and I know it's because it's under the surface. Some people are very good at hiding it. I know if say you're in a like your position, say you work for a municipality or a federal government, provincial government, and you end up being on the front lines of some type of disaster, you're not only trying to smile and do your job and maybe other jobs, but you're going home and your family life has also been impacted because maybe your house burnt down, maybe so it's sometimes, depending on the role you have to play, it can actually impact you to the point where you need to quit your job. And I think we just saw with the 20th anniversary of 9/11, I think you saw some of that. People never totally recovered from that. In fact, some of the stuff that happened to them, they changed their entire life because they couldn't cope, or they just it changed them so significantly. So I think it's just been, my caution is very much be mindful of your own mental health, because just because you think you can do 20 things at once maybe isn't the best thing to do, and be mindful of those around, because you never know what's happening behind the scenes with them too.
In those courses, self-care is always one of the parts. And just as you were talking, it reminded me of this is a free training from the John Hopkins University, John Hopkins Medical Center. They have free training for triage during a crisis situation. So it's free online training. They have little video vignettes, but it was free. I live in Kemptville, so I identified it to our mayor, so that but it was John Hopkins Medical Center, and they have a university attached. But it was free training, online training for triaging and helping during an emergency. And it just came to mind when you started mentioning about training. So this is free. This training should be free for anybody who's available. And John Hopkins University Medical Center has made it free, or at least it was free. I'm guessing about 6 months ago. So I assume if they offered it once, it's probably still free. So just one of the things that not widely known, but if you don't ask, nobody will tell you.
Thanks so much, Ken, for your inputs. Our values as Indigenous peoples is really about, yes, we take care of this vessel, but we also be very mindful about the circle and the community around us. And so to even, put that investments to say, take a course with the Canadian Mental Health Association, just to have a better understanding. You know, we're not here to fix people, but how can we help? How can we lend an ear? How can we become more aware? So even just to, you know, tap into some of those resources not only makes us stronger and helps us to understand, but it also helps to make our circle stronger. So thank you so much for, you know, your input and those resources that you just laid out there. I really appreciate that. One other thing, Leann, that you had talked about was, which is alarming to me, you had said there's 40% of the businesses do not recover, or they don't
Reopen. Yeah.
like that's staggering. That is a lot in our economy. So
Yeah, and that's a stat. It's a US stat, but I mean, I look at that and think I don't think that's some, you know, whether it's 38, whatever, but that's their stat. And it is, it's just to think of, you know, I could be one of those statistics. And so how do I do stuff now to make sure that I'm not one of those statistics? I think that's critical.
yeah. And particularly too, making sure that you have the proper insurance. I think, you know, we think, okay, I signed up for this, I got this,
Yeah.
and you don't read I don't read all of that fine print.
Yeah.
So that's excellent advice to go talk to your insurance broker, just to make sure you're covered.
Well, and I'll give you one example too, to another caution. In the case of Fort McMurray, there was one guy we interviewed. He had two businesses, but both the same broker, two different insurance policies. He didn't realize he had two different. One had business continuity insurance, the other did not. And so even in his case, he thought he was covered because he said, well, I bought business continuity insurance. And the guy goes, not on this one. And so, you know, just make sure that it comes back to what do you need? And then making sure you get that coverage. So, and trying to have a broker that can dumb it down for you, because really none of us, you know, that's, you read all this verbiage and it's a lawyer who wrote it, but a human being doesn't understand it. And so really understanding what do I need, and then go get it.
Yeah, that's really great advice. Helen, not even to put you on the spot, but I don't know if you have any questions, comments, a story about today's topic.
I actually do. That's why I had muted. Thank you so much, Michelle, for hosting this, and Leann for this really informative information. I work for the Chilcotin National Government up in Williams Lake, and as you're probably aware, we also went through our own disaster. The big wildfires where our communities were evacuated. As an Indigenous organization, we are also filled with trauma, and trauma impacts some of these people in different ways. So I really appreciated Ken's comments on mental health, but he also sort of sideswiped a little bit. One of the things I'd be really interested in your insight in is, as we're going through the preparedness and the actual incidents, how do we recognize those people who will be our allies, who will be our strongest people to help us? Because we can't do it all ourselves. Like, one of the things we learned is it took a big team to respond to these emergencies. And some people were of a disposition that would be very, very hopeful and respond well and not needing a lot of direction. And others really kind of crumbled. And, you know, it's not exactly as a good fit, and as far as who we would have expected to be really strong and step up and be as helpful as they could be in an emergency and perform well. What kind of traits and what kind of skill sets and capacities should we look for in those people that were asking us to assist us in preparing and getting through those initial stages?
Well, I think, I mean, there's no simple answer. I'm going to try and give some examples that might help. I know in the US, and I was trying to find a lot of models, and this one I like in particular, they have what's called recovery support functions. So they have 6 areas that they look at. So say they've got an area, it's called infrastructure. So you have a team that works now on infrastructure as their core responsibility. So they're looking at what would the plan be, who would take the lead, who would be in charge, who else do we need involved at the table. So they make a plan around that piece. You have people looking at housing, you have people looking at health and social services, you have people looking at community capacity building. So these are the kinds of areas that you have people now around the table talking about these things, and that will help you kind of identify who's got some of that, who's learning, who's got the leadership skills, who else do we need to supplement them in case we're lean on that, because it may be a regional approach you need. So it may be yourself and your neighboring communities that you're going to have to tap into to build a regional response and to help, because in doing that too, you can get their equipment. A lot of places have MOUs in place where they say, okay, if this happens, say there's a big storm outside of Calgary, well, I might have a response with Calgary to have them bring some graders, some snowplows in that case. So, that's building those external relationships, but also that internal relationships, that capacity building is, I think, critical. At the end of the day, though, it's funny. It's not funny, but it is. I think back of Fort McMurray, and there was a Facebook page right away, and it was, what are the stupid things you took with you? And it was because people think second by second, and you don't know if something happened, say a tornado hit right now, what would we all do? We'd probably all do different things. Some people would just like, oh, my hair's on fire, I don't know what to do. And others would say, okay, take charge, I got to do this. And they're very linear thinkers. I know military people I have come to really respect because they're trained in disasters, and it's life and death scenarios, and they're logical. Most of them have been trained to be logical, very like leadership. And so if there are people like that in your community, that's a great skill set to have as well. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it is kind of getting those relationships built now, identifying people in those key areas that would have the expertise. If you don't have it, getting that external expertise to add to the equation. That should help in the future, and then you just keep improving on it.
Okay, thank you.
That's great. It's all about relationship building and capacity building within our own, communities, organizations. So really good point, really good response, Leann. I appreciate that. So if there's still time, if you have any questions or comments before we say goodbye.
It's Ken back again. My comment on what Helen was saying is that anybody and everybody that you touch should be offered the training. For example, in Kentville, we have Beth Donovan Hospice. So anybody in the hospice who's given training on how to deal with the people that are end of life could be given the training on mental health first aid. We have an organization called Community Living, which helps the disadvantaged in their day-to-day living. That kind of training could be given to those as well. I mean, they're given minimum training on assisting those people that need assistance, specifically in the areas but there's a lot of volunteers that are associated. They could be trained, and making it aware of it and walking through situations where you have to do disaster preparedness, even though it may not happen. But we have a small creek here. I mean, it could rise, and it has risen in the past. I mean, anything could happen. A plane could fall into our community. There could be a fire. We have a Ferguson Forest here. It could catch on fire. So that anybody and everybody should be trained. So that I believe strongly in the training, and even first aid training. You're as not the mental first aid, but the regular first aid, you're required to recertify every couple of years. So it's train, retrain. And to what Leann was saying on the military and the police, they train, they retrain, and they retrain. So anyway, that's enough of me.
The other thing I think, Helen, to think about as Ken was talking to, ICS training. I don't know if any people in your community are taking any of that, but it's they have different levels, and it really is. It is a good introductory course. It's really emergency management is what they teach, and the different kind of roles that are playing in an emergency operations center. But I know there's a community just outside of Calgary that all of their employees are now asked, or they have to take ICS 100 training. So all of them have a basic fundamental understanding of disasters, what happens, and they start to identify leaders in those areas as well. So, I mean, that's a potential thing to look at. The other thing is, I know from Red Cross, and I don't know if you have an MOU with them, but what I learned in Alberta, after the Alberta floods, Red Cross used to go in anytime, like say there's a fire over here, Red Cross is there. But now they have to be invited to come in. They will never enter without an invitation or an MOU, like some type of agreement in advance. And so I know that it's if you don't have an agreement with them, it might be, you should explore that as well, because they can often do your reception center and take care of that emergency support, that ESS kind of function. So registering people, giving them, clothing, shelter, whatever they're going to need, cots. But they're the ones, that's a great function that they can play if you don't have resources within your community to take on that function.
Yeah, well, TNG is in the process right now of forming, storming, and training the capacities for our own emergency operations center. So especially since COVID, we've really created and stepped that up and created our own ESS system as well. One of my observations from the wildfires is that the people, so with the wildfires here, it was all around us. And people just kept abandoning ship. And in the end, in the last week before, we ended up with this very small core group of people that you might not have even expected to step up and be a part of it. And people that were, that are managers and leaders that you might expect to stick around and be of assistance to their communities.
Yeah.
Not to fault them. I'm just saying, they had other priorities. They wanted to evacuate with their family. As one example, and evacuate early, or they may have had health issues that we were unaware of. And that's sort of where I was going with my question is what kinds of things do we need to look for so that when we are in those emergencies, we have the right people in place. And it's not just necessarily a matter of training them. It's do we look for people who are ready, willing, and able to maybe let their family leave on their own, kind of thing.
Well, I mean,
not necessarily, specifically that they get training for it. But as I said, we ended up, on the day that we were evacuated, that we were given the order to evacuate, there were probably only 5 or 6 of us left servicing 6 communities.
Yeah, the exercise piece is part what could help is those, once a year, we're going to practice this disaster. And sometimes it'll take different disasters, like you'll create, I know Rocky View County, every year they have a different disaster they practice. So it could be a wildfire. It could be, and there's actually virtual software that I know there's companies, they'll take you through virtual scenarios as well and make it feel real. And so, I think that's part of it, because if I go through something and I'm somewhat being tested as to my responses, I'm giving you clues as to how I would respond in a real situation. So I think part of that could come out by practicing different exercises, for sure. I don't know, it's a tough one, because I mean, you think of Afghanistan as a case, people who had to stay versus those who's like, I'm leaving half my family behind, you go, I'll stay. Like these are horrible decisions, because in case of wildfire, it could be life and death decision. What are we going to do? And that's I mean, that's why things like this are important, because it's the awareness too, right? So now that you've had this discussion, you're thinking, I think we're going to do, start to put some of that plan together, see what we've got internally. What do we have? Let's try and bring people together and practice some scenarios. I think there's another one I heard. They have like a softball tournament every summer, and their little town just grows exponentially every summer because all these people come with trailers and cars and all these people are there. And they said, so they practice every year on what happens if something happened. How would they get that many people out of town quickly? So, I think something like that, and whether you have I assume you've got like a fire chief or something, like someone who's plays that role of emergent, maybe it's yourself, I don't know, plays that key role as the person in charge when something happens. But yeah, it's important to build that team now and practice, and you'll realize, as you're growing, as you're changing, as you're practicing, this person is better in this role, they're not so good in this role. And having backups, like that's the other thing. If I'm the role of a certain situation and I'm on holidays, that when the fire hits, someone told me the disasters in their communities always happen at 4:30 on Friday on a long weekend. And they said, and nobody's around. And so that's the other scenario. I might have been the one designated and I'm not there. I'm on holiday with my family. So you're like, oh my gosh, who's covering for her when she's away? So yeah, I mean, you're asking all the right questions, and yourself where those kind of those gaps are. And like I said, my best advice would be kind of, and I'm happy to connect with you after like that, because I really think that recovery support function is a great model, because you could say, okay, we're going to just look at housing. How are we going to deal with that? Or we're going to look at that community capacity building element. Who's going to lead that? Who do we need involved? What resources do we need that we don't have in our local community? I do think it helps ask the questions you may not otherwise know what to ask.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for the question, Helen. And Ken, thank you so much for your comments and the great reminder to tap into those resources. And I really appreciate your sound advice, Leann. So thank you so much for responding to Helen's question. It was really good advice. Practice. And that's something I realized too, like we don't do in this organization that I've been a part of for 17 years. We've never done anything like that. So I think that that's really great advice. Even once a year, right? Just to put that into perspective. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. Glad that you came. I'm so thankful, Leann, you've carved out a chunk of your time just to present and offer your good advice, your good knowledge, your wisdom. So thank you. So as we go on the rest of our day, may you look around and see the beauty that is all around you. Take a good breath in, go outside, get some fresh air, take that good breath in, and just have a moment to just appreciate the gift of this day. So thank you for joining us. Have a good rest of the day. Peace.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.